So first of all, give a general introduction into explanation. So it's been a few years since I've been saying this. Buddhism, what is its philosophical view and what is its ethical conduct? So all religions have these two aspects, and each individual also holds some kind of a philosophical view. So the Buddhist philosophical view is dependent origination. Dependent origination, and the ethical conduct is non-violence or not harming others. And I additionally say that the first one, the former, dependent origination, has connection with, is related with science, and ethical conduct, non-violence, has peace of mind, peace in the world. So Buddhism, philosophical view of dependent origination and the non-violent ethical conduct are. So with regards to the second one, ethical conduct of non-harming others or non-violence, is to say that ideally you should, the best is you should help others. And on here we can talk about bringing peace in the world and not harming others, helping the world and bringing peace in the world. And dependent origination, the philosophical view, we can see that whatever things there are, they are interdependent. So if the community that you are living in, the world at large, is happy, then you would be happy. If the environment that you live in is peaceful, and you will also have peace. So since we do not want happiness, but since we do not want suffering but happiness, when you harm others, cause harm to others, you will have unhappiness. And when you help others, you will have happiness. And therefore, this philosophical view and the of dependent origination and the ethical conduct of non-violence are related in this way. So you, the students, should keep this in mind. If you are asked what the philosophical view and the ethical conduct of Buddhism are, you should answer in this way. So amongst those who are listening to me, so perhaps one of the senior most officials, former officials of Tibetan government or CTA is Treshiwangdula. And so Treshiwangdu, when I was talking about this, and he had kept that in mind. And at one time when we were in Switzerland, and so he didn't remember the Tibetan origination, the word Tibetan origination as the philosophical view, and he was looking at me as he was giving his talk. And then I remember mentioning the philosophical view is dependent origination. So with regard to dependent origination, we can relate it to a philosophical view or the environment, and Also, our health, because our health also is dependent on many different causes and conditions. And so, in Tibetan, we talk about 5 major and 5 minor sciences, such as art and crafts, medicine, and epistemology. So, with regard to epistemology, it has to do with removing our ignorance and understanding the reality and truth. So, for world peace, we need peace within ourselves, in our mind. It's because what disturbs our peace of mind is the destructive emotions, such as anger and so forth. So, the ethical conduct of nonviolence is related to that of dependent origination, the philosophical view. And so, health also, our physical health, for that we need mental health as well. So, as the Tibetan children, so those who only think of material development alone, they only think in terms of physical health when we talk about health. So there are, of course, marvelous facilities in the big hospitals for physical health. But nobody talks about mental health. So we need to make up for that. So for that, it can be done through the Indian tradition. And within the Indian tradition, Buddhist tradition, as I said yesterday also, the Indian practice of ahimsa and that of compassion. And so, in relation to these, there is in Indian tradition that of the understanding of the mind and emotions, psychology. And so the Buddha expanded on what was already there in this tradition, in the Indian tradition. So as soon as the Buddha became enlightened, he said he found this nectar-like teaching, which is profound, and so forth. And if he were to teach this to others, nobody would understand. So I understand this as the Buddha having given the essence of his teaching with peace, by profound and peaceful. He refers to that of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, and the phrase free from conceptual elaborations refers to the characterless teaching on the lack of characterization or characteristics, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And then the luminous and unconditioned refers to the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. Particularly those of the Tathagata Garbha Sutra and so forth, which come under the category of the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. So, during the second turning, the perfection of wisdom teachings, the Buddha had already taught that of the object clear light, which is emptiness, And these Tathagata Garbha Sutra and so forth, these other sutras, which belong to the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, teach that of the subjective clear light, the subjective clear light, which is the clear light mind. So the Chonang teaching of Shentong comes from this kind of teaching. In the Tantra, there is teaching on this clear light mind. And so this becomes manifest in us when the three visions of whitish appearance, reddish increase, and blackish near attainment. In other words, when these three or the 80 different conceptions dissolve, then this we are left with the clear light mind. And so that is free from all these other conceptions, 80 conceptions or the three visions, and therefore can be understood to mean Shentong or the other emptiness. So ultimately, this innate clear light mind is the doer or the basis of all appearances in the universe. In the Dzogchen terminology, they use Shi and Shinang, the basis and the expression of the basis. So these different appearances, including the three visions of clear white appearance and so forth, all dissolve this expression of the or the appearance of the basis or the expression of the basis, all dissolve into the basis. So when we have the 80 conceptions and so forth, from there, what happens is the different mental afflictions arise because of the inappropriate mentation. So ultimately, there is the Buddha's Swabhavika Kaya, the nature truth body. So when one attains Swabhavika Kaya, then that of the wisdom Dharmakaya, and together with it also that of the Buddha's physical body also arises on the basis of this clear, the innermost subtle wind energy. So from this innermost subtle wind energy arises that of the Sambhogakaya, and from the Sambhogakaya emerges or emanates that of the Nirmanakaya or the emanation body, and therefore these two, the Sambhogakaya or the complete enjoyment body and the emanation body are the bodies of the Buddha, which are meant for helping other sentient beings. Whereas the Dharmakaya, the wisdom Dharmakaya, and the truth, the nature truth body, that of the Sambhogakaya, Swabhavika are meant for one's Buddha's own interest. And so, because of realizing this, the profound nature of emptiness and so forth, fully the Buddha turned away from, the Buddha's mind turned away from giving teaching right after his enlightenment. And therefore he said, This peaceful, profound, free from conceptual elaboration, luminous and unconditioned, this nectar-like truth I have found or discovered, even if it was taught to others, no one will understand it, so I shall remain silent in the forest. And so the Buddha, though the Buddha had become enlightened, and he kept silence in the forest for some time after his enlightenment, and then the gods like Brahma and Indra and so forth came forth and requested him to give teaching. And so accordingly the Buddha turns the wheel of Dharma. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma is the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, and then the second turning is the perfection of wisdom teachings, and then the third turning with regard to that of the subjective clear light, that of the. And so what he was going to teach after his enlightenment, and it seems to be summarized in this verse. So the Master Shantarakshita came to Tibet in the 8th century, and he introduced the Nalanda tradition of Buddhism in Tibet. So in this tradition, there is emphasis on logic and reason. So, as I quoted these lines of salutation from Brahmana Samuchaya, so Tsongkhapa also has mentioned that this these salutation lines of Brahmana Samuchaya were explained in the sequential order and the reverse order in Pramana Vartika Karika of the Dharmakirti, and therefore we can understand that the Buddha is an authoritative or reliable person through his teaching, understanding his teaching to be incontrovertible. And then Rinpoche also mentions in his Destiny Fulfilled that in Tibet there was a saying or tradition or belief that these texts on logic and epistemology have no relevance to the attainment of Buddhahood and enlightenment. Yet people still say that Dignaga was actually prophesied by Manjushri to keep up with his writing of Brahmana Samuchaya, because it would be like the eyes of the world in the future to for beings to open their eyes for truth. And so Manjushri was said to have prophesied that it would be Brahmana Samuchaya would be very helpful or beneficial to beings in the future. So this was considered to be literally true. So on the other hand, people were saying in Tibet that these epistemological texts are no use. But on the other hand, they also say that the Manjushri had prophesied that the Brahmana Samuchaya would be beneficial to beings in the future. And therefore, Rinpoche Tsongkhapa himself Brahmana Samuchaya and the Brahmana Vartika Karika were studied by Tsongkhapa. And then I also sometimes read Pramana Samuchaya, and so there is a contradiction in this saying that on the one hand the text on epistemology are no use, and on the other hand that Pramana Samuchaya was prophesied to be beneficial by Manjushri. So this is this most unreasonable assertion Rinpoche says in his Destiny Fulfilled. So in Pramana Vartika Karika of Dhammakirti, Rinpoche says that in the second chapter, which is the chapter on proving the reliability or the authority of the Buddha, saying that the Pramana Vartika Karika explains Pramana Samuchaya's this chapter second explains the Pramana Samuchaya's salutation verse in its sequential order and in its reverse order. And shows that the epistemological texts are actually meant for our enlightenment. And so, in Tibetan tradition, we do study these texts on epistemology. There are many different texts, such as including the Treasury of Logic or Epistemology by by Master Sakya Pandita. And then with regard to the tradition of debate itself in Tibet, it is said it was newly devised or by Chaba Choji Sengye. So when we debate, the arguments are of correct reasoning comprise, or syllogism comprise of the three modes. So the debate was prevalent, most prevalent in Tibet. And when Tibetan Buddhism spread from Tibet to Mongolia, this tradition of debate also spread on the basis of the epistemological texts, spread to Mongolia as well. And so Mongolians studied this text on logic, and also they were very good at debate. So when the Mongolians set for Geshe examination, the accent, Mongolian accent, when they are pushed and they find difficult answering the questions, their Mongolian accent would be stronger, would turn stronger, it is said. So when that happens, then the Geshes, the Tibetan Geshes, won't understand what the Mongolian Geshes were saying. And so when a Mongolian Geshe was sitting for his debate, and so he was not able to answer well, but he said, I couldn't actually bring it out in words, but I know what the answer is. And so today, it is only amongst the Tibetans that we have this tradition of studying Buddhism through logical arguments, the reasoning and debate exist amongst Tibetans alone, and therefore we are able to sit together with modern scientists and have discussions. And so, because of the emphasis on using logic and reason, Master Chandrakirti also in his Madhyamaka Avatara says that the subtlest understanding of the suchness of dependent origination is not comprehended by masters like Vasubandhu and Dignaga and so forth. And they have, in a way, Chandrakirti says, they have forsaken this philosophical understanding. And so Tibetans, when we get at difficult points of debate and within the philosophical exegesis, then there are lots of questions raised, and therefore people have written lots of books which answer the difficult points as well. So though there are many countries following the teaching of the Buddha, Buddhist countries, yet it is only amongst the Tibetans, we Tibetans, who have the tradition of studying the teaching of the Buddha extensively and rigorously through reason and logic. So, of course, Buddhism had spread to China even before it spread to Tibet. Xuanzang, the Chinese master, he was a follower of Master Nagarjuna's tradition. So I had learned something new. In South India, somewhere in South India, there was a river. So there is a source of the river. There was a river, and it was told to me that Xuanzang had reached there. And from there, he went to China. So there was a hill behind the place, and I was told that Nagarjuna also lived there, I was told. And so I went to the hill. So there was, it was like a cave sort of thing, a rock cave, and on top of the rock cave, people told me that there was a white kind of a snake. And when I was coming down, I found a conch shell, a white conch. So there was a wall, and on the wall, somehow, there was a conch I found, and there was nobody around. So because I thought if there were anybody there, I would actually ask for this conch. And so I took the conch, picked the conch up, and put it in my shirt. So Xuanzang was a follower of Master Nagarjuna. So, therefore, we have the Chinese translation of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And so, since it was translated there, it should have been used to study through logic and so there is no translation of the Pramana Vartika Karika of Master Dhammakirti and Pramana Samuchaya of Dignaka into Chinese. So in Tibetan, we have the translations of these texts, the Pramana Samuchaya and Pramana Vartika Karika. And not only that, we also have the tradition of studying these texts. In the past, Sakya used to be quite a prevalent place for study and debate, study of logic. And later on, the most prevalent study of logic spread in the Gelug monasteries. So in So in the central part of Tibet, Uzang, and also Kham and Amdo regions, the study of logic in the monastic institutions of the Gelug tradition spread widely. So we study the Vinaya also. There's not much to debate into that. And also Abhidharma study was there, but not much debate as rigorously as it was done in the study of Pramana texts. So Sera, Drepung, Gaden, and so forth were the main centers of study, rigorous study of the Buddhist philosophy and Buddhism through logic and reason. Even though we are in exile these days, we have these monastic institutions, Sera, Drepung, Ganden, and so forth, re-established in South India, and so this tradition still goes on very well. And also, at my suggestion, these monastic institutions have instituted the study of modern science as well. And so, we have preserved our own tradition of studying the text of logic and epistemology, and on top of that, we have added the study of modern science as well. At this juncture, critical juncture in our history and of Buddhism in Tibet, and in Mongolia also, there was so much restriction to study and preserve Buddhism, not by the people following the teaching, but the authorities of the countries. So there was objection to study Buddhism and study philosophy. Whereas in exile community, amongst the exile community of Tibetans, we have the study of our tradition of studying Buddhism through logic and debate, and then people from the Himalayan regions of India and other countries can also join them. So there is an organization which was formed by the people of Himalayan region of India, whose objective is to actually transform the monasteries and nunneries in the Himalayan region into study learning centers. So Shandarakshita spread the teaching of the Nalanda tradition in Tibet, which is a combination of the Pramana and middle-way Madhyamaka tradition. Whereas he established this tradition, Tibetans seemed to have taken more interest in Tantra and coming to India for more Tantric texts and teachings in the past as well. And so today the people of the Himalayan region are taking interest in the study of Buddhist philosophy through debate, using logic and reasoning. And not only amongst the monastic institutions, the tradition of debating exists, but school children also today have started learning debate, and so in Ladakh there was a Sikh boy who also was quite adept at debating, and so these school children are like the seeds for future generation, for future generations to pursue the study of debate Because learning debate through logic, where we talk about the logical extension, logical pervasion, and whether there is necessity for being something being such and such and so forth, would be very helpful. So gradually, because the psychology that we study in Buddhist literature came from India, and so if we could actually bring it back to the Indians in school system, it would be great service. Mahatma Gandhi spread the principle of non-violence, which is an Indian practice throughout the world. And similarly, if we could spread the study of psychology, mind and emotions, and also logical approach, this is my wish. It would be good. So I jokingly tell Indians, in the past, the ancient Indians were our gurus, our teachers, and I tell them, we were your chelas or students. But today, the gurus, the teachers, neglected your own ancient tradition, whereas us chelas preserved this tradition. So today, there is a role reversal. The chela, the ancient chela, has become are becoming the guru, and you, the ancient gurus, are becoming our chelas, and therefore we can see how well we have preserved in Tibet the tradition, the Indian tradition that spread there. So we go through the triple process of study, or listening to the teaching, reflection, and having gained conviction through reflection, and we use the understanding in meditation. So towards the end of the chapter 6 of Madhyamaka Avatara, Master Chandrakirti
아니 대공 뜻이 송제상 이제 전에 멀리 본 홀로에 팝을 쳐와인스. 그래서 아주 빨리 취주 집어다 결론도 저 뭔가 전에 지수 이란요 할래요. 그래야 내가 로지정에서 대걸 해서 이 시르랑게 아니 생각에 결론도 되체 매 빨리 기타 취주 집어다 가지고 애는 그런저 빨리 기타네 뭐
So one time I was meeting with Sri Lankan scholars, and they recited certain lines from the Pali scripture. I used to tell some Thai monks and the Theravada monks from Thailand who are my friends. I tell them that you following the Pali tradition, do not use logic and reason in the study of Buddhist scriptures, and therefore it's like you don't have teeth. When you actually encounter a very tough point in the teaching, you cannot chew it. And this verse from Madhyamaka Avatara, where Master Chandrakirti says that thus illuminated by the rays of the wisdom's light, the Bodhisattva sees as clearly as the gooseberry on his open palm, that the three rams and so forth. And then the verse 25, 225. And so, Master Chandarakshita has set this example of studying, pursuing the study of Buddhism amongst the Tibetans. And so, for this, we should be grateful to him. So I'd like to thank everyone in the Himalayan regions for keeping up with the study of logic and debate in their own lands. So Tibetan contains, in Tibetan we have all the different traditions of the Nalanda lineage to study the classic, the great texts of the Nalanda tradition. And so today, this language has become indispensable if you wish to understand the classic texts of the Indian tradition. And so Tibetan is the best language today for studying the Nalanda tradition. The profound Nalanda tradition, the in-depth study of it, for in-depth study of it, and we should, there's no... people should study Tibetan for the in-depth study of the Nalanda, the profound Nalanda tradition, and therefore this Tibetan knowledge and Tibetan culture. So this is Tibetan culture, and today the greatest population of Buddhists is in China, in the People's Republic of China, and there are more and more Chinese taking interest in studying Buddhism, the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism. And so we can actually help the Chinese in the future if we actually pursue the study of Buddhism well. So many of the students of philosophy in the big monastic institutions are quite, they like money, and so because of that, they could actually ask for fees from the Chinese. And so economically, we can rely on China, and in terms of Dharma, we can actually contribute, help them. So, with regard to the text in praise of the Buddha for teaching dependent origination, so we stopped at the verse number 8. We are on verse number 9 today. So I read Pelmarteba by Johnny Lama Rinpoche.
Yeah. Godo.
So wondrous teacher, wondrous refuge, wondrous speaker, wondrous sphere, I pay homage to the teacher who taught well dependent origination. So that was done yesterday. And so next,
상제점된데
so with regard to the Buddha, was a unique teacher amongst all the different teachers of the different religious traditions. So, as I explained earlier, the verse that he uttered in the beginning before he gave teachings to anybody, the Buddha taught. So his uniqueness has to be understood through his teaching, based on his teaching on dependent origination. So he has taught dependent origination. And so I also yesterday recited or quoted this verse where the Buddha where he said the sages help beings to liberation through his teaching of suchness. And so with regard to the suchness or the reality, there are many different ways to understand it. So we have the Gangyur, in which we have the perfection of wisdom teachings, the different sutras, and then in the Gangyur, the Tengyur, the translations of the Indian masters' explanations of the words of the Buddha, there we have over 220 volumes in the Tibetan book format. So we have the tradition in Tibet of reading these scriptures, and these are not used as books for study. So it is actually important for us to use them for a study of the Buddha Dharma. So regarding Madhyamaka, we have the tradition, we have the saying of the yoked necks of two lions. One is Madhyamaka and the other is Pramana, that of the epistemology. And so the philosophical view that we hold on to or which we follow mainly is the Madhyamaka philosophy. And in order to be able to hold it up well with full confidence, without any fear, we need the other line, which is the Pramana. And so when the necks of these two lines are yoked together like that, one facing, that each one facing in different directions, no one can actually come near these two lines or near someone who holds both with confidence. No enemy can actually trample them. So with regards to Rinpoche, he first studied under Chögyet Döndrup Rinchen in his own native land, and then after he came to the central Uzang part, he studied Madhyamaka under Master Rendawa. So at that time, there was this saying that wherever you go, you actually think or talk about Madhyamaka. Wherever you sit, you actually think about Madhyamaka. And so he followed the triple process of listening to the teachings, reflecting on them, and then meditating. And so he actually combined these three together and practiced the teaching of the Buddha. So we are on verse number 9 now. To help heal sentient beings, O benefactor, you have taught the peerless reason of S to ascertain emptiness, the heart of the teaching. And so verse number 10, also read. So emptiness doesn't mean nothingness, as some people do talk like, oh, there's nothing, everything is empty. But In any case, the meaning of this profound meaning of emptiness or selflessness, regarding this, there is an interpretation according to the Sotantrikas, the Vaibhashikas, and Chittamatras, which are quite coarse understanding of selflessness. And when we come to Madhyamaka, and within that, of course, the other traditions also, other philosophical schools within Buddhism talk about causality in terms of explaining the dependent origination. And Madhyamaka, regarding the Madhyamaka, of course, there's understanding of dependent origination in terms of how things are designated, whereas between the two sub-schools of Madhyamaka, the Savatantrika Madhyamakas, when they identify the object to be negated in establishing emptiness, they actually identify it to mean that a thing, if something existed, without being designated or imputed by an erroneous mind, and from its own side, then that's the object to be negated. Whereas the Prasangika Madhyamakas, who do not exert any objectivity in things and self, say that things are merely imputed. And according to the Prasangika Madhyamakas, it is said that ignorance of the reality as it is permeates all other destructive emotions, just like the bodily faculty permeates all other sensory faculties. So, whereas the attachment, for example, does not cover or permeate that of anger or hatred, and vice versa. So, Master Aryadeva in his 400 verses says that by destroying this ignorance, the fundamental ignorance, all other mental afflictions would be destroyed. So there are practices whereby one can, to a certain degree, to curb. For example, meditation on the repulsive nature of the body curbs or overcomes that of the attachment and so forth. So since all mental afflictions are permeated by this ignorance, which is to say afflicted intelligence, this is overcome through the understanding of dependent origination. And so, when we have these destructive emotions arising in us, what happens is, and when we look at things, the things do appear as if they have some independent, objective existence in and of themselves, such as beauty, seeing beauty in and of itself, and ugliness in and of itself, and so forth. And so when this is because of the ignorance which sees things to have some objective independent existence. And because of this, then there is the inappropriate mentation, and due to which the afflictive emotions arise in us. So I usually refer to quantum physics to think about the non-objective existence of things. So, based on our belief that there is some kind of independent existence in things and self, then we have the inappropriate rumination, and that in turn gives rise to the afflictive emotions. And so in Madhyamaka Avatara, it is said that because of this attachment, or the Madhyamaka Avatara says that because of the personal identity view, there is this, we cling to this self being independently existent, and therefore what it clings on is this independent self, and therefore the yogis strive to refute that self-existence. And then I also explained this verse from Madhyamaka, Mula Madhyamaka Karika, where it says karma and delusions, the cessation of karma and delusions is liberation, and karma and delusion arise from mental conceptual thought and so forth. So what we get into is that things arise, it appears to have some objective existence, independent existence in and of themselves, and whereas things do not exist the way they appear to us, so ignorance holds on to things as if they have some independent objective existence, which is how things appear to it, and it clings to that. And the wisdom realizing emptiness does away with that. And so, with regard to dependent origination, Pelman Terpa by the Chöne Lama Rinpoche says, by dependence, what is not rejected is the suchness, and by arising or arisal, what is actually asserted is the existence, the conventionality of how things exist in the world. And therefore, this reasoning of dependent origination is the king of reasoning, which is the infallible or reasoning. Kanda the Gyawadana Modu Sadi, any so verse number 10 says, this way of dependent origination, those who perceive it as contradictory or as unestablished, how can they comprehend your system? So saying contradictory here means that since those schools who say that because things arise through their dependence on their causes and conditions, therefore they have there's some
게다 소리.
essential existence in and of themselves.
교다네. 모두버슬도 지르버.
So this is an assertion by some of the philosophical schools within Buddhism, and then by saying that this reasoning is unestablished, it is asserted by those of the non-Buddhist traditions.
가서다 때는 중어 말이 있으니
So because they say that a self, there is an independently existing self which is permanent and so forth, therefore it's not dependently arisen. And then verse number 11, verse number 12. So when we say that things are absent of intrinsic existence, it becomes uneasy for us to establish that things to be dependent, because things do exist to have some existence in and of themselves, objectively. And so, whereas when one sees the opposite, since there can be no function in emptiness, no emptiness in what has functions, one falls into the dreadful abyss you maintain. So, Belmont Thurba, Master whereas Nagarjuna maintains that things are dependently arisen, but that because things cannot be found when we search for their identity within themselves, and therefore what this shows is that they are merely designated, and therefore dependent origination is used to prove that things have no objective independent existence. So when the reason to prove that things have no essential existence in and of themselves because they are dependently arisen, this shows that they come about through many different causes and conditions, therefore they lack any intrinsic existence. And so one falls into dreadful abyss you maintain if you assert any intrinsic existence. And verse number 13, therefore in your teaching seeing dependent origination is hailed, that too not as an utter non-existence nor as an intrinsic existence. So if things were to have any independent existence from their own side, the non-contingent is like a sky flower, hence there is nothing that is not dependent. If things exist through their essence, their dependence on causes and conditions for their existence is a contradiction. So if things were to exist as they appear to us, which is the independent existence, therefore, since no phenomena exist other than origination through dependence, no phenomena exist other than being devoid of intrinsic existence, and you are taught. Verse number 16 also, verse number 17, in the Paramita Sutras, Panchaparamita Sutras, when we read the scriptures, it would appear that the Buddha was actually repetitive. Whereas if you look closely, what he goes through are the different objects that he explains to be empty of intrinsic existence. So verse number 17 read, verse number 18, that there is no intrinsic existence at all, and that all functions as this arising independence on that. What need is there to say that these two converge without conflict? And so, both the extremes of nihilism and eternalism are rejected. So with appearance, the Rinpoche says in the three principal aspects of the path, with appearance, the extreme of existence is rejected. And with emptiness, that of the nihilism is rejected. So things do appear to have some objective independent existence, whereas when you are able to confirm from your own experience and understanding that things are merely imputed or designated, that they don't exist the way they appear to you, therefore, you understand that things to have no intrinsic existence, yet it's not saying that they don't exist, but they don't exist independently. That they exist by way of dependence through designation alone. So in the recognizing the mother, which is a song of the view of emptiness, Jangya Rebbe says that today some of our students of the Gelug tradition seem to posit an object to be negated as if it's some kind of a solid thing there. And yet they still talk about the emptiness of independent existence while holding on to something that is to be negated as if it's something there solidly. And therefore, if you are not able to hit home to the point of what you are trying to understand, there is this danger of the mother, the old mother, running away from you. There was just so Jangya Rebbe Dorji says that the face of this mother, which is immaculate, this solidity doesn't seem to be there. So when you are said that there's nothing apart from appearance to us, some people find this quite they become afraid. So though things appear in a certain way, they don't exist that way. And so when we Jangya Rebbe Dorji calls the emptiness mother and the object on which you establish emptiness as the father. So because these students of the Gelug tradition are not able to understand and are not able to actually posit that things are merely designated, they seem to still hold on to the belief that there must be something there as an object of an unerred cognition, unmistaken perception. And therefore, because they are not able to say things are merely imputed, they, while trying to reject the object to be negated, when we establish emptiness, they still hold on to the solidity in things. So, at the end of your analysis of how things exist, what you actually come down to, what all these analysis and the arguments boil down to is, for you, is that things are merely designated. So, Jonel Lama Rinpoche says this dependent origination is the king of reasoning and it is the infallible teaching. So verse number 19 read. Verse number 20. All of this is devoid of essence, and from this arises that effect. These two certainties complement each other with no contradiction at all. And verse number 21, what is more amazing than this, what is more marvelous than this, if one praises you in this manner, this is real praise, otherwise not. So the non-Buddhist traditions who assert an Atman or a soul theory, and also amongst the Buddhist philosophical schools, there are those of the Vaibhashikas, Sautantrikas, and also Chittamatras, and amongst the Madhyamakas, except for those who assert that there's nothing apart from things, merely designated things. So these philosophical schools hold on to some philosophical assertion. They are not able to understand this profound emptiness. Verse number 22, being enslaved by ignorance, those who fiercely oppose you, what is so astonishing about their being unable to bear the sound of no intrinsic existence? Whereas when you are able to actually assert that there's nothing apart from, nothing that has any intrinsic existence, but that things are merely designated. But having accepted dependent origination, precious treasure of your teaching, your speech, then not tolerating the roar of emptiness. This I find amazing indeed. And verse number 24 read, verse number 25, and now 26. So, intrinsic nature, when we use the term intrinsic in terms of, in relation to a person, we say, oh, this is his nature. And we would actually have this idea that, oh, this is something unchangeable. And then uncreated, because things, good and bad and so forth, have to be posited in relation to others, and non-contingent, dependent origination, contingent and created, how these two converge upon a single basis without contradiction. And then verse number 27. So amongst the Madhyamaka philosophical schools, we have the Sautantrikas, whose proponents are such as masters like Bhava Viveka, and then Prasankikas, the proponents of which are Master Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti and so forth. So when we look at the difference between their philosophical assertions, the tradition which can actually destroy all objectification of things in us is the later school. So the one which rejects any objective existence in things. So, therefore, whatever originates dependently, though primarily free of intrinsic existence, appears as if it does possess intrinsic existence. So you taught all this to be illusion-like. So the Buddha taught that things are merely designated. On the other hand, he also gave very extensive teachings on how things come through dependence on causes and conditions. Though through this very fact, I understand well the statement that to what you have taught, those opponents who challenge you cannot find faults that are caught with this reason. So verse number 30, through this very path of dependent origination, the rationale for your speech, and so forth. So verse number 30 done. So with due respect to Your Holiness, I would like to thank Your Holiness for this profound teaching. We have a question from Tsongkhapa Gyal from Sara College. So this is a praise to His Holiness for being the teacher of the combined teaching of compassion and emptiness, making the teaching clear. So I find today there is so much competition in the world today. Because of this, there are because of this, people think of actually victory for oneself and defeat for others. So how should we have healthy competition without intending or desiring victory for oneself and defeat for others? So of course, when we have competition, and if without the sense of victory for oneself or desiring victory for oneself and defeat for others, if you actually engage in competition with the sense of benefiting others, as we find different reasonings that are used in the Pramana text, without this intention for victory for oneself and defeat for others, but to actually bring progress and development in others, with this intention, we need the competition, sense of competition, with the sense of helping others. So in debate also, we also have this competition. There are cases where people use debate to defeat others with ulterior motive. One time there was a geshe who had some kind of a resentment towards the other opponent. And so when the opponent was sitting in a debate to answer questions, and as they actually passed through the different classes, progressing along their study, and also even when they entered the tantric colleges, they were still staying distant from each other. That's not good. So we should have this competitive sense with the intention to help others.
So
this is from the study is from the questions from the students of TCV College Hostel, Bangalore. The first one also, this one too. With greetings to His Holiness. So when you are trying to sincerely fulfill one's own goal, there are people who try to actually bog you down. So how should I motivate myself and remain positive when I face people who are trying to discourage you? So when you practice Dharma, you should actually find out the reason why the other person is trying to discourage you. So whether that actually has to do with something that is actually because of you, like your laziness, because of your laziness, is the person actually criticizing you? So if that is so, then there is a way to actually overcome your laziness. and therefore you should study hard.
바르베 도스지 통중소로 제대로디
So the other person trying to belittle you would actually turn into a positive thing for you if you keep up with your courage and enthusiasm.
중소로 근데 제베이나
Whereas if there's no reason for the other person to actually look down upon you, or
미샤리야다
I mean, the person himself or herself becomes an object of your compassion. And particularly if the person does these things, bad things to you, with a sense of competition through jealousy, then you should feel compassion towards them. So, of course, in the monastic institutions where students are debating, there is always some competition. And the third question also comes from the Bangalore TCV School Hostel. The source of all happiness and well-being in this land of Zen surrounded by snow mountains. May His Holiness live long. May His Holiness live more than 113 years. Though I may have a good intention to help others, but others seem to be extremely abusing me physically and mentally. So how do I? So in the face of extreme physical and mental abuse, how do you prevent your mind from becoming overwhelmed with negative thoughts and afflictive emotions? So when you are practicing bodhicitta, you are thinking of helping others, whereas when people unreasonably or with the faulty reasons try to obstruct you, you need to actually accept, you need to actually face up to that challenge. So in the Bodhisattva's secondary infractions, if a Bodhisattva does not try to avert or overcome a negative action of someone through the proper means, whatever is necessary to do against that person or the action, if the Bodhisattva does not do that, then that's going against the Bodhisattva vow. So, for example, the Chinese are putting lots of restrictions on the study of Tibetan language itself. And then the religious practitioners are called revolutionary and so forth. And because of being idealist, and the communists are said to be realist or being practical. So, as Buddhists, we actually find truth from facts. So as time passes, the hardliner Chinese authorities, they actually lose ground. Whereas democracy is something that everyone appreciates, and because there's no freedom under the Chinese communist rule, people criticize them. So this the Nalanda tradition that we as Tibetans have preserved as our culture, in order to preserve, administer it, and promote it, this is what we are doing. And many Chinese today are saying that this Tibetan tradition, which has come from the Nalanda monastic institution, is something scientific. And so we need to actually face up to that challenges that we face by seeing their wrongdoing and accordingly use the means to overcome their criticism. So the tradition that we have is something which is respected by people around the world who are actually able to understand it. So what the Chinese communist hardliners are doing is covering one eye and one ear, listening with only one ear and looking at things with one eye, like blind. And so, since we have both 2 ears and 2 eyes, we have the right to listen to what is right, what is true, and what is wrong. So, following the hardline principle, how can they actually prove themselves right even though they talk about democracy and so forth? So as I said earlier, what we are following is the philosophical view of dependent origination and the ethical conduct of non-violence, which is beneficial to oneself as individual and others as well. So, just as Soviet Union has changed completely, greatly, China also is undergoing change. So we need to stand our ground because we have every reason to do so and try to oppose the wrong done to us, which is unreasonable. So it's not good to just follow whatever others say, whether it's dirt like a stool or something sweet like a candy. Next, the question comes from Pema Wongdu from TCV School. John Dera. So my question is, how does one reduce the extreme arrogance of the extreme well-educated people, and on the one hand, and how do we motivate students with poor academic performance? So we should have pride. Feeling confidence, self-confidence is what we need. Thinking that I can actually learn the different subjects. Because Bodhisattvas are saying that I will become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too abide to dispel the miseries of the transmigrators. So this shows the courageous nature of Bodhisattva practitioners. Whereas if you become, this kind of confidence, self-confidence is what we need. On the one hand, being proud of what you can do is needed. But if you think that who is better than me, and that's a total misconception. Of course, there are many people who are much better in their knowledge and so forth than yourself. And so, you need to see the reasons to have self-confidence and think that I can do it. In terms of your study, for example, Whereas there may be students who, for example, here we are all maybe Tibetans, so we are followers of Buddhism, and particularly the Nalanda tradition, Nalanda philosophical tradition, and also logic and epistemology. So, with regard to these, we are also number one in terms of our culture. And then, religiously speaking, we are born as Tibetans who are the subjects of Avalokiteshvara. And so, we need to, there is every reason for us to be proud, thinking and of our own cultural tradition, our religion, and our language as well. So, if you think through, we should always feel proud as Tibetans. There's no reason to feel low-spirited. So amongst the refugees in the whole world, there's no other like Tibetans. So we are not only preserving our own culture and tradition, but we are able to use this to help others. So we should not feel discouraged at all. We should always feel self-confident in ourselves. So, fifth question, student of class 9, Lakwa Drama. With due respect to His Holiness, how should we define happiness? And what is meant by the statement, contributing towards others' happiness brings about one's own happiness? So, as I explained yesterday, happiness, there are two. One is the happiness within oneself, it has to do with, which has to do with the mind, and the other is physical enjoyment or physical bliss. So, people are mostly in the modern world more or less lost in physical, trying to pursue physical bliss and not thinking about mind, bringing about mental happiness. And therefore, because of that, people even go to the length of committing suicide. Whereas religious practitioners living up in the hills as hermits, and although physically they have difficulties, yet that doesn't really affect their practice and happiness. And so, the mental happiness is the main thing. If you are peaceful, relaxed or calm, the root of which lies not in this selfish, self-cherishing attitude where you think only about yourself, me. And then you always suspect others. You're looking to the right and left and so forth. And you become unhappy. The more self-cherishing you are, the more unhappy you would be. As Lama Chapa says, self-cherishing attitude is the foundation of all misfortunes, whereas cherishing others is the source of all good. And so this shows that all the problems in the world, the root of them lies in cherishing oneself alone. And then Shantideva says that unless you switch your own joy and happiness with the suffering of others, live alone, reaching Buddhahood, even in the cyclic existence, you will not have happiness. So you will not be. So if you are dedicated for the well-being of others, cherishing others over oneself, everybody would like you. People would say, oh, this person is really kind and good. Whereas if you are extremely selfish, even a dog who does not think of others or helping others, I mean, other dogs would run away from that dog. Whereas if a dog is kind to other dogs, I mean, the others would actually be attracted to that dog, even when they hear its barking.
Social animals.
So as human beings, we live in society, and therefore we are social beings, and therefore if you are compassionate and loving towards others, I mean, you will benefit. If you remain selfish, you will actually lose in this community. So if you remain selfish, nothing good will happen to you. So in Tibetan society, for example, if you help others as best you can, for example, helping people in India or the world, even though we are exiles, we still are able to, even though that may not be very profound, but we still pray. May all sentient beings have happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering. So this kind of altruism is not a foolish, blind faith. It is based on reason that all sentient beings have the Buddha nature. So if sentient beings are able to put effort, they have the potential. The Buddha himself has said they have the potential for becoming enlightened. And so this natural Buddha nature or Buddha potential, to understand this is very important. So not only do we think of Tibetans alone, but we can also help the world, benefit the world at large. I have many friends. This is because I have this Tibetan culture and tradition which I share with them, and this is what people appreciate. Since my childhood, I have been studying it and then practicing the Dharma. As soon as I wake up, sometimes when I have good time, more time, I recite this text on in praise of dependent origination. And when I was in Tibet, I went to Tsongkhapa. After climbing the Pumbari, the hill or mountain called Pumbari, and I actually at that time memorized this text that morning. And so this is our tradition. So leave aside the people of other parts of the other countries, but even amongst the Buddhist countries, there are no countries where there is study of this kind of text, except we Tibetans. So we have every reason to be proud of our own cultural tradition. So with regard to study, reflection, and meditation, even though you may not believe in what you would study, but you should still study the books and also listen to what scientists say about some things, and then compare them. So there are books. Some Geshes compiled the book. It was conceived by me, and so there are books on Buddhist science and Buddhist philosophy. The series of books on the science and philosophy in the Indian classics. And so one of these books had reached Lantu University in China. So some of the professors had access to it. And so after reading it, they have said that, Tibetan Buddhist tradition belongs to the Nalanda tradition, and it is the Nalanda tradition is scientific. And so this actually helps shine the Tibetan tradition. So one Tibetan wrote me a letter where he mentioned that today China rules us Tibetans politically, but in the future we may rule them with our Dharma, the spiritual tradition. So this may be possible. So there's no need for us to feel low in esteem. Next is a question from Dendril, class 9 of Jontra. With due respect to Your Holiness, how do we distinguish between religious ethics and ethics that are not religious, or secular ethics? Please give me some guidance. So we talk about helping others, benefiting others, and having good hearts towards others, kindness. And for that, we may use our dharma or religion as the reason that we have faith in it and so forth. So when you actually practice this kindness and so forth with the background of your religion, that's religious ethics. Whereas according to the Indian tradition, and also scientifically, people say that if you are kind and have good heart, it helps your physical health as well. So we are not talking about the teaching of the Buddha or past and future lives and so forth, but we are talking about this life. And so for our own good, physical health and so forth, when we practice kindness and so forth, we actually are practicing these principles in a secular way. So when you reason that you should be good, because if you do bad things, you'll go to hell and so forth, those are religious beliefs. So we are dependent on other people around us. It's like the field where we grow crops. And so the field is taken care of because of that we have crops. And so likewise, people around us in our community are the ones on whom we depend for our good. And therefore, we need to cherish and hold them dear to us. And so the Buddha's statement, monks and scholars should examine my teaching, just as a goldsmith tests the gold, and they should not believe in whatever I have said, but check my teaching and see whether there is whether it's reasonable or not. Just as a goldsmith tests the purity, the quality of gold by burning, rubbing, cutting and rubbing, and that the monks and scholars should not believe in my teaching because they respect me. Whereas all religions, of course, they are helpful to their followers, to people, and people of other religious traditions usually base themselves on faith. And all religious traditions teach the practice of love and compassion. Whereas the Buddha teaches the love and compassion, the practice of love and compassion based on the understanding of dependent arising. So, because of this, we can be proud of this tradition that we have. So, based on the understanding of how the mind works, the workings of our emotions, mind, and so forth, and how we can bring about good health, peace of mind, and also for our own peace and happiness, we need to depend on others. So that's a secular ethics. Whereas if you say, or if you do bad, if you harm others, you'll go to hell, then it becomes more religious. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Now tomorrow. Thank you.